Welcome back to The Real P3, where passion, purpose, and progress come together in animal nutrition. We're not just talking pigs anymore. This is the new era of The Real P3, pigs, poultry, and pets. Join your hosts, Chantel, Daniel, and Casey, Animistic's powerhouse team of animal nutrition and health experts, as they dive deep into the science and heart behind animal and pet nutrition and health. From commercial swine systems to backyard chicken flocks, from champion show pigs to your favorite couch-loving golden retriever, we're covering it all. Expect real stories, real science, and real solutions for those who feed, nurture, and innovate across species. Because here at The Real P3, we're faithfully serving through science plus heart. Subscribe now and come thrive with us.
Welcome to the Real P3 podcast. My name is Daniel Adams. I'm the Animal Nutrition Business Development Manager here at Animistic. And today I have with me Dr. Laura Ellestad. She's an Associate Professor of Poultry Physiology, and she's also the Director of the Graduate Programs at the University of Georgia. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
Absolutely. So I met Laura during my stint at the University of Georgia when I was a postdoc. She was very much like a mentor for me during that time, and since then throughout my professional journey. So really excited to have you on the podcast with us today. So I guess I'll go ahead and jump right in with all of the questions that I have for you. So starting off, can you share a little bit about your background and how you first became interested in poultry science?
Yes, of course. So like many, I think, undergrads that come in through animal science departments, I was pre-vet. That was sort of my life plan. And as I was just trying to get experience with animals, the diverse animal experience, so looking at not just clinical experience, but working with animals in other ways to sort of boost my application with, various experiences, I started doing research at the in the undergrad department at the Department of Animal and Avian Sciences at University of Maryland, just again to diversify my experience with animals. And I absolutely fell in love with the research side of things. And then as I was still considering going to vet school, I was sort of considering a DVM PhD tract, and I had a conversation with, his name was Pete Gasper. He was a faculty in the College of Vet Med at Maryland, and he taught our Anatomy 101 class. And he very much, I appreciated his honesty when he said, if you really think you want to go do research, don't even bother going to vet school. Like, he did the DVM PhD tract, and he felt like he was not taken that seriously as a vet student because they knew that he wanted to go and do research. So after thinking some more and getting some additional research experience, I sort of changed my tactic, and then I went to get my master's degree in the same department at the University of Maryland, and this was in fish. Actually, it was in aquaculture nutrition. But the mentor that I went to work with, his name was Joe Soares. He had done a lot of his work prior to my joining his lab in laying hens and looking at vitamin D. And he had just sort of recently pivoted into aquaculture because it was kind of becoming a big industry in the state at the time. So I did some work with him in my master's degree. And then again, it was poultry nutrition, but it was more biochemistry. So I looked at digestive tract enzyme activity. And then after graduating, I went to work with Tom Porter in the University of Maryland as a lab technician. And I quickly decided that just working for someone else wasn't really going to do it for me. So I, during that time, then embarked on getting a PhD. And his lab, the focus of his lab was looking at pituitary gland development using embryonic chickens as a model for that. And so that was sort of how I first got into working with chickens per se. And I was there for working and PhDing part-time for almost 15 years, honestly, before I came to the University of Georgia. And so that was a really fantastic experience and kind of opened my eyes to the world of chickens and how they can be a powerful model for, general vertebrate developmental biology, but then also, obviously the things you can do are going to be directly applicable to the poultry industry as well. So now being at the University of Georgia, where the poultry industry is one of the top or it is the top agricultural industry in the state, and one of the top industries altogether in the state. My research program has kind of shifted a little bit. I still do basic research, but I also always have the industry in mind with the types of questions that I'm asking.
Cool. So looking back, what excites you the most about the path that you decided to take and the opportunities that it has created for you?
So I'll be honest, like when I got my master's and then I was like, nah, I'm kind of done with research for a while. And then I went to work. And then again, as I mentioned before, I was sort of like, well, I kind of don't want to work for someone else telling me what to do for my whole life. So that's when I sort of went the PhD route. And so I think, I don't think I would ever be anywhere but academia. I mean, to be honest, I pretty much grew up in academia. I've never really worked anywhere except academia. But I like the freedom that I have in terms of the research questions I ask. I mean, there's responsibility to be able to fund my research program, but I also can pretty much direct the way I go with the types of questions I ask and the type of research I do. I like to tell people, which I didn't realize before I started as an assistant professor, I'm like basically self-employed, but with a safety net, right, of the university. So yes, I do have a supervisor, and obviously I have things I need to do working for the University of Georgia and the state of Georgia. But the day-to-day, I'm responsible for running my little microcosm of a lab and getting funding for that, and I can kind of take it in any direction that I choose. So I like that freedom, again, with the safety net. I really, really, really enjoy working with students, graduate students and undergrads as well. I do take that part of my job quite seriously, and I think it's probably the most important thing I do is to train the next generation of poultry scientists, or potentially poultry vets, depending on what students want to do. And really, this might sound like weird. And I do remember Joe Soares as my master's advisor telling me that he thought working at a university and working with students kind of kept him young in a way. And I thought it was an odd thing to say at a time because I was obviously young at that time, but now I'm not. And I see what he means, so it's sort of a way, I don't want to say live vicariously, but it's really exciting to watch young people embarking on what is the rest of their lives, and being able to provide advice and mentorship. And you think everything when you're younger, but the more, I can assure you, you don't. I would not have, if I could give myself advice, I would do that. But obviously part of growing up and becoming an adult is figuring things out for yourself. So getting to see that is really rewarding for me.
Yeah. And I imagine just being at UGA, you get exposed, and running your own lab, you get exposed to a bunch of different types of people, a bunch of different types of backgrounds that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were strictly just working in like an industry setting or just working in a lab. I also think it's super unique. I think there's a lot of people that just go straight through school, like immediately master's, then immediately PhD, and they try to get it done as quickly as possible, and then they try to jump into the industry or into an academic role. So the fact that you have that kind of space in the middle where you actually went and did the work before doing your PhD is really an advantage.
Yeah, yes, I will say, I mean, I probably took the longest route possible between like finishing
Yeah.
because I always, between every degree, like I got my undergrad, I actually didn't take that much time off between getting my undergrad and going back to get my master's. But then, I think I worked for 2 years before going back to get my PhD. And then I took a little bit longer because I wasn't a traditional grad student. I was sort of working in the lab at the same time. And then I kind of stuck around the department and worked with Dr. Porter and worked with another faculty I actually went back to fish for a little bit. It was with environmental gestagens and looking at fathead minnows as a model for toxicology. So during that time, it did allow me to like mature a little bit. I got experience helping the PIs write grants. Tom was the department head at the time, so I was really involved in running the day-to-day of his lab. So, I do think there is an advantage to that has helped me be as successful as I've been able to be at the University of Georgia because, I mean, I was a little bit older, but I also just had the experience that it took. And so, I mean, I was like everybody else. I wanted to rush through everything, but then I do remember at some point, probably in the middle of my PhD, that I was just like, what's the rush? Like, I can still live while I'm doing this. Like, I had this mentality that I had to finish everything before I could start living my life, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, I was like, what, like, why? Like, I'm in my mid-20s. I'm an adult. I can buy a house. I can still live my life while also going to school. So, and I think that's something. Again, that's just something that comes with time. And you think you're old, and you don't have time to do stuff, but truly, during undergrad, early grad, that is the time to just enjoy things.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Cool. So switching a little bit to talk about your teaching philosophy and your teaching strategy, what do you enjoy most about teaching students in poultry science? I know you kind of alluded to it a little bit before, how it helps you stay young, but what else do you enjoy about that process?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's obviously that, and just, I think it's this is going to sound so cheesy, like a magical time in your life when you're sort of an undergrad or early grad student. But I teach an avian surgery class. Well, it's called Avian Surgical Techniques. It's a great opportunity because it brings a lot of students into our department that are sort of traditional pre-vet or pre-med or any pre-health major, essentially. And many of them have not had any classes with birds or with poultry. So it's a great opportunity to expose those students. We use laying hens as a model, so I can expose the students to that don't already have that experience to, how just laying hen physiology. Like, a lot of them don't even know that there are meat chickens and egg chickens, right? They're kind of shocked when they learn that they're laying an egg every single day. And so we it's an opportunity, just by the nature of the class and the procedures we do. They learn surgical techniques, but they also learn to evaluate how successful their procedures were. And part of that is day-to-day monitoring of the birds, right? So they have to take care of the birds every day that school's in session and track egg production, feed intake. So I don't know that they're necessarily realizing it, but they're learning about poultry while they also are learning these other things that they think can help not they think it will help them as they go into pre-vet or vet school, medical school, things like that. So that really has been it's one of those things. When I started my faculty position, I had a lot of experience doing research, writing grants, running a lab, but I didn't really have a ton of experience teaching in the classroom. Like, I'd mentored students in the lab, but and I didn't really know what to expect. But I will say, I was very surprised is wrong because it makes me kind of sound like, oh, I don't want to teach. But there are a lot of faculty at tier 1 research institutions that kind of just they don't consider teaching an important part of their job. They sort of do what they have to do in the bare minimum. And so I was really pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it, how much, I was teaching a surgery class without a veterinary background. So I had the opportunity to learn stuff, right? So that I could be able to teach it things that I wasn't trained in. So that was fun. And just exposing students to things that allows them to develop skills that are not necessarily academic per se. So the class, I mean, they work in a group of 3 to do their surgeries. So they have to work together with teamwork. They have to communicate to make sure that they're checking their birds, and they're developing, quote unquote soft skills that I think really will help them succeed in whatever they do. And that is something, again, that is just by nature. I mean, you teach content. Some people will remember it, but most of the time you don't remember a class that you took, right, a long time ago. But trying to develop, just getting them to interact with other people, how to communicate, writing, a little bit of data management, but things that, it sort of allows me to help them develop those things that'll then help them be successful in whatever they do later in life. So that is something that again, I truly enjoy, and I think it's probably the most important thing that I do.
Yeah. It's funny that you were talking about that. I hear a lot of people say things like, oh, I have to teach 2 classes this semester, but I'm really focused on like my research focus area. But it's good to have people out there that treat those truly as equal and not as just, this is something I have to get through so that I can define my research objectives. I always found that interesting because I also feel that if you're really involved, especially on the undergrad side, that's a great way to get to know undergrads and recruit really good grad students through that process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have currently I have 2 students that have been, one is in his 2nd year, or I guess he just started his 3rd year. The other one just started his 4th year, and they both worked for me they took my class and then worked for me as undergrads. And then I actually just had a student that started, who she didn't do research with me, but she did take my class and then decided that she wanted to go back. So yeah, it is, because it's a good opportunity to get them experience, because again, like I have yet to flip someone. I don't know. Actually, Colin wanted to go to vet school, and then he started working as research, and he decided to get a PhD. So he might be the one person that sort of changed. But generally, and I do feel very strongly in involving undergrads in my research program. It depends on the semester, but I usually have like 3 to 5 in there at a time. And I think it's a good experience for the undergrads themselves, and also a really good experience for the grad students, because it allows them to get mentoring and training experience, right? So they train them technical skills, but they also, virtually every student that comes through my lab will get like an undergrad research grant. So they have to present data at a symposium on campus, and they participate in our journal club. And so they get experience presenting things. And I think it's good for, it's good for the undergrad, but also it's really good for the grad students that are really working with them directly, because it gives them, I don't know if they always appreciate it, but I do think it gives them experience. Again, you train and you teach, and that just helps you learn, so I think it helps them develop and understand the research they're doing a little bit better. And it also, again, is something that can prepare them to work with other people in management or in academia when they move on after graduating. So.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about kind of your current research program, what you're focused on, things that you're super proud of that you've accomplished since you started at the University of Georgia.
Yeah, of course. So in like a big picture description, I think of my research program is understanding the physiological basis of economically important traits in poultry. So we do experiments with broilers, and those have been focused on metabolic efficiency, physiological basis of feed conversion, and sort of why are some birds from the same line and raised in the same place more highly efficient than others. And so we found some pretty interesting results that for me, being trained as an endocrinologist, it was, I mean, obviously I'm looking at the endocrine system, but we found some pretty interesting results with insulin-like growth factor binding proteins and insulin-like growth factor and signaling in muscle. And so we've done that. We've demonstrated potential involvement of that system using different models, whether it's feed efficiency, whether it's heat stress, birds that have differing growth rates, because of genetic differences or feed intake, if you feed restrict them slightly. And so we do think that's an important system that is, for me, it's good. It's a good thing. It's completely really understudied in poultry and birds. So it's kind of a nice niche to have, because I can, it's kind of wide open, right? You're not trying to fit into an existing body of literature. And so we found some things that are consistent with mammalian systems and some that aren't. And then we do use cell culture in vitro models a lot to try to get at mechanisms behind some of the signaling mechanisms or nutrient uptake mechanisms related to growth efficiency in broilers. And so we culture cell lines and primary cells to do that. And then I also do a lot with laying hens, and that is primarily focused on looking at calcium and phosphorus homeostasis and how, particularly in the last decade or 15 years, they've really started keeping birds longer in production systems, because it does, the more eggs a hen lays, the less cost per egg you have, right? Because you're not regenerating the flock as much, and they're not molting them and taking them out of production anymore. So they're really sort of expected a lot of production systems to, lay eggs for until like 100 weeks of age or slightly longer. But while they're able to do that, they've been selected to do that for persistency of lay. You have the traditional problems that come along with that are skeletal issues, osteoporosis, fractures, eggshell issues. And so you have both economic and welfare problems. And so there's been a lot of attention paid to nutritional strategies to help manage that, whether it's with vitamin D or messing with calcium and phosphorus levels. I was really kind of surprised when I first started looking into those systems, probably in the 2018, 2019. So shortly after I came to Georgia, that there really hadn't been any fundamental biochemical physiological research done in laying hens probably in 20 years, so that's another area that was kind of wide open to look at, and to sort of try to understand the physiological basis of how these birds are able to lay so long, understanding what changes as they get older, so that, potentially if we see disruption in, let's just say calcium transporter expression in the shell gland or something,
right,
that is something that we could target in different ways to potentially try to help them maintain optimized calcium and phosphorus utilization efficiency for a longer period of time. And so that the laying hen work is something that I started, I'm actually proud of this because we got through a 2-year laying hen, which you helped us with some samplings on that. And it was a pretty monstrous undertaking because we had to bring the little chicks in at day of hatch. And then we took them out to about 95 weeks of age. So we raised them through the pullet phase, moved them to cages. We're still analyzing the data, but hopefully in the next few months, we'll have some publications out where we really did a detailed look at physiological changes related to calcium and phosphorus utilization throughout the day. So throughout an egg production cycle, a single egg production cycle, and then at multiple ages. So we really have an idea of what's changing, potential imbalances where those are occurring so that we can help inform the industry, whether it's through targets for genetic selection, whether it's through targeted feeding, in terms of when is the best time to give them minerals or vitamin D or something like that to help the birds be able to maintain their egg production for longer in a healthier manner.
Yeah. I don't know how much work you've done with alternative like rearing systems. Does any of that go crazy or change as you put birds outside or birds have a chance to move around? I'm sure it does, but
it does. And that is something we're pushing the department to try to get aviary housing here. We don't currently have that for laying hens at the moment, although I think we're close to being able to find a place to put an aviary system. But yeah, that absolutely, because they're more active, they actually tend to have more fractures because they're moving around and banging into things more. But I think there has not been, that I'm aware of, a whole lot of attention paid to the interaction between housing and physiology, and do the birds need to be raised differently, right, to be better prepared to go into an aviary system versus a cage system. Are their nutrient requirements different, right? Do they probably have a different energy? Like, I'm not a nutritionist, but on that laying hen project, I did work very closely with Rosalina Angel, who's at the University of Maryland, who's a extension nutritionist who's focused on calcium and phosphorus for a long time, and then nutritionist for the H&N. Those are the birds that we used. And, for me, I've always just been like, well, we'll just feed the birds, and as long as they keep growing and doing their thing, it's fine. And they are amazingly resilient, right? Like chickens are. Like, it's kind of takes a lot to have them not do well. And luckily one of the PhD students on that project also came in with an interest in nutrition and a background in nutrition. So, they were constantly tweaking the diet and changing the dietary energy levels to match feed intake and messing with, what I considered was a little bit extreme in terms of changing stuff. But I do think it was helpful and kind of, realistically, I'm not sure how much that happens in the industry, but I do think that it sort of optimized our experiment, and so kind of took that out of the equation so they're not deficient. And so, that is something, knowing that even in a cage system that we did that study, and that there was so much that they were doing to mess with energy levels and things like that, I can imagine that housing is going to impact the requirements, right, that you have for laying hens. So I haven't had the experience, the opportunity to do a ton of work with that, but I definitely am looking forward to us hoping to get a system, or collaborating with other universities that do have systems. And then I have also embarked on a collaborative project with another faculty here, and then someone at the ARS research facility in Athens that do a lot of work with pasture poultry. So we didn't do much this summer just because there was some uncertainty with where the continuation of the project. But last summer we ran a couple different lines, like a faster, heavier growing bird versus a lighter, slower growing bird in a pasture system. We still We haven't. I just got a student that's going to be working on analyzing those samples, but it's kind of another model where you're looking at birds that are better adapted to that housing system, and to see what changes and what differences physiologically, and how they're better adapted. And so I think that the plan is to continue that. I mean, it's pasture poultry, so we're kind of limited to the summer.
Yeah.
So we'll do, next spring and summer, hopefully we'll do a couple of experiments and also be able to look at that. Some of the, again, I'm a physiologist and endocrinologist, so I collaborate with a welfare behavior person. So I think we try to kind of look at the interface of those two areas. And so it's a good opportunity to do that.
Cool. Well, one last question for me before we go. What advice do you have for young professionals or graduate students that are kind of on the cusp of graduation, that are looking for their next opportunity in poultry science or in animal science in general?
So I always, even broader than that, I always tell young people, keep your mind open. People have such a, some students come in with such a one-track mind. They want to do industry, they want to do, academia, they want to do this, do that. If an opportunity arises and you're given an opportunity to do something, take it, because you don't know. I wouldn't be sitting here today if I hadn't taken opportunities to do research, when I was a student, right? And so I sometimes, I do get students that come in and they're like, oh, I can do this, but I don't know if it doesn't, they don't think it fits exactly in their life plan. But at the end of the day, you do something for a year or two, you can always change course, and you never know the doors it's going to open to you. So again, keep an open mind, say yes more than no, just to get experience and soak that up, because this is the time. I mean, the older you get and the more kind of involved in a career you get, you sort of can get pigeonholed into something. And so, take opportunities that come and dive into them and experience them, as much as you can, to learn as much as you can and just get as much experience, meet as many people as you can.
Yeah, and even short-term experiences allow you to meet a ton of people and learn new things, and all of that just continues to build your
network.
Or your network, yeah.
Yeah, because again, you never know. You never know what personal connection with people can do, in your life, whether it's personally or professionally. So, yeah.
Cool.
And be nice to people. That's my other. I would say it differently, but since we're on a podcast.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for being with us today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.